you. But now let's move on to an exclusive. On the sidelines of the India-Singapore Connect event, our colleague Shireen Ban caught up with DBS's global CEO Piyush Gupta, who spoke about the growing economic ties between India and Singapore, the acquisition of Lakshmi Vilas Bank, and much more. Listen in.
In the middle of COVID, we had the opportunity to acquire a distressed bank, Lakshmi Vilas Bank, through a competitive process. And that obviously has changed the complexion of our business manifold. We're now 500 plus branches. We're in 350 cities. And so we have a scale today that we certainly did not even 10 years ago. Now, like many other international players, we paid tuition fees along the way. But I have to say, today, India is our fastest growing business, even though the LBB franchise will still take some time to make it profitable. But in aggregate, it is our fastest growing business.
What about, appetite for putting more money to use in India? You talked about Lakshmi Vilas Bank and how that's playing out for you. I know that the government hasn't moved so far as its bank privatization plan is concerned, but IDBI Bank is still up for grabs and that hasn't moved. Is that a potential area of interest?
You know, if you look at our M&A strategy for the group in the last decade, we like to do bolt-on deals that we can integrate and create value from. So large transformational M&As in banking are very challenging and rarely work. And so that's been our mindset. Do enough, consolidate, and then build your own capabilities at the same time. And so, yeah, I will say we're always open and on the lookout to do the right kind of deal, but it's got to be a kind of deal that we think we have the management bandwidth to bring some value to.
Well, speaking of value, you've had a very strong Q1, record net profit, total income, return on equity, and it's been a great run for banks, not just globally, but here in India as well. As you look at the future, macros continue to be fairly resilient, even though geopolitics is uncertain. What do you see going forward?
You know, what's been obvious, the tailwind banking has had is that interest rates have been high. And so that's helped the net interest margin of most banks. That's obviously quite helpful.
So you're factoring in 1 or 2 cuts this year?
I think probably 2 is my bet, but I don't think you'll see as many cuts next year as a lot of people. In fact, even this year, people speculated 6, 7 cuts. I think we'll be lucky to get 2. And I don't think the pace of cuts next year will be as sharp as people think.
Let's talk about India and Singapore. And as I said, natural allies, and there has been momentum building along this partnership. How do you see it from here on? And what do you believe will be the points of partnership where more can be done at this point in time?
So, Shireen, for me, this India-Singapore Connect, the corridor we're talking about, there are really 2 important things that we want to try and achieve. One is to celebrate what we already have. And the truth is that in the last few years, a lot of people have lost focus on understanding how important this relationship is and how much attraction it has gained over the last 5, 7 years, especially in recent times with the boom of the Middle East.
Yes.
So everybody tells me, Middle East is where it's happening. And I sometimes laugh and tell people, the Middle East might happen in terms of promise in the future.
Singapore's already happened.
Think about Singapore. If you look at any calculation, Singapore's investments in India are well north of $100 billion, probably close to $150 billion. That's massive. It's much larger than any single country in the world, the stock of investment, but also the flow of FDI. You look at the last 5, 6 years. Every year, Singapore is the largest FDI into India. And some people tend to believe that this is, round tripping of somebody else's money like Mauritius. Yeah. It's actually Singapore money. It's GIC, it's Temasek, it's DBS, Sembcorp, Singapore Airlines, Singapore Telecom. Yeah. These are Singapore's champions who are heavily invested in sector after sector. We're in the port, we're in infrastructure, we're in energy, we're in telcos, we're in finance. So it's an unappreciated story, and we need to make sure we celebrate that a lot more. The reverse is also true. When I talked about we created DigiBank in India and then took it out all over the world, that reflects a couple of really important things. India's ability, the talent base, and the tech capabilities are really exceptional. And so that you can actually take that and engineer and drive a lot of stuff as you go out into the East. We've been able to do that in our own case. And therefore, we need to recognize and appreciate that story. That's the first part. Now, to your specific question, the way forward, I'm just so bullish on the opportunity we have for 2 or 3 reasons. Number one, everybody knows India is the story of the moment and will be the story for the next several years, decades maybe. And a lot of Singapore's capabilities and strengths are well aligned to be able to participate in that India growth story. You asked which sectors. You think about, we talked about AI, machine learning and technology. Now, India has some strengths, so does Singapore. Energy, it's a big deal for India, 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. Singapore is a champion today in renewable and green finance. So there's an opportunity for us to co-construct, co-create, including moving down up the value chain, things like hydrogen and so on. If you look at infrastructure, continues to be a big need in India. Singapore, I mean, everybody knows infrastructure, Singapore is great, but it's not just because it's a small city. Singapore has capabilities. Public housing, for example, I think there's a huge opportunity over there. Water, going to be a big crisis in South Asia and India. Singapore has mastered water. So there are fields in infrastructure that Singapore can clearly participate in. And a source of capital. It's a small country, but we have over $1 trillion in reserves, and we are consciously reallocating capital across the spectrum. So that's a big opportunity. The reverse is true. India's always had a Look East policy, now Act East policy. But for the first time, I can see that India is actually focused on both sides of the supply chain and looking at Asia ex-Japan ex-China quite seriously. One is on the sourcing side. As you think about Viksit Bharat, the best way you get Viksit Bharat is to plug into Asia supply chains. And that is something that is already beginning to happen. The geopolitics helps, and because of geopolitics, all our clients, for example, the Koreans, the Taiwanese, everybody from Asia, the Western multinationals, are all looking at creating an additional air capacity in India. So that's a huge opportunity for India to be able to attract a lot of this supply chain work. But equally at the tail end of the chain, for the first time, Indians are beginning to think about global brands. And many of these global brands will play extremely well in Southeast Asia. People don't realize, but you think about Indonesia. Do you know what the word for a three-wheeler auto rickshaw is in Indonesia?
Tuk-tuk.
Bajaj. Do you know why Bajaj is Bajaj?
Yes.
So Indian Godrej, it's got a lot of brands in Malaysia and South. So Indian brands, actually, the price point and the brand positioning is quite good. So there's an opportunity for India on both sides, the sourcing procurement side, but also the distribution and sales side. So I do think because of the alignment of interests, the nature of geopolitics, the massive growth, Singapore doesn't have a natural hinterland. And therefore, the ability to build this connection is actually very, very interesting for both countries.
Okay, time for a short break, but a lot more news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned.